Step away from my contractor, Barrett. This entrance belongs to the community. Maris Holloway said it loud enough for the concrete crew and two neighbors to hear, then pointed toward the street like she was ordering me off my own property. Behind her were the remains of my oak trees, fresh-cut stumps, torn roots, piles of wood chips. And beyond them, workers were setting the foundation for the HOA's new luxury entrance monument. Maris claimed the HOA had an easement. She said the project was approved. Then she sent me the bill for clearing the trees they had destroyed. So I did something she wasn't expecting. I let them keep building. Then I hired a licensed surveyor. A few days later, he stretched the boundary line across the construction site and went completely quiet. Maris already had her ribbon-cutting ceremony scheduled. I decided not to cancel it. If you want to understand why I didn't start yelling the minute I saw those stumps, you have to understand what I do for a living. My name is Barrett Voss. I'm 46 and I own a small custom millwork shop about 15 minutes from Hawthorne Trace, the neighborhood where Laurel and I bought our house 8 years ago. I build stair parts, built-ins, mantles, cabinet doors, oddball trim profiles, and the kind of one-off pieces people bring you after 3 contractors have already told them they don't make that anymore. Wood teaches you patience. It also teaches you that measurements are not opinions. A 1/4 inch can ruin a cabinet run. A degree out of square can turn an expensive door into firewood. So when somebody points at a line on the ground and tells me where my property ends, my first instinct isn't to argue. It's to ask what they measured from. Our lot sits at the front corner of Hawthorne Trace in North Carolina. 5 mature oaks used to run along that side between our yard and the landscaped entrance. They were there when we bought the place. Big trunks, high canopy roots that had spent decades gripping that red clay. In summer, those trees kept the afternoon sun off the house. At night, they blocked headlights from cars turning into the subdivision. After rain, the bark went almost black, and the whole side yard smelled like wet leaves and clean dirt. Laurel handled the books for my shop and had the practical ability to look at any situation and find the invoice hiding inside it. When I told her the HOA wanted to redo the entrance, she said, "How much?" $84,600. She looked over her glasses. For a sign, apparently the sign has self-esteem issues. The project belonged to Maris Holloway, our HOA president. Maris was 54 tall and slim, with bright blonde hair cut around her neck, and a habit of dressing for board business like the governor might stop by. The day she unveiled the plans, she wore a fuchsia pantsuit, pink heels, small gold earrings, and a delicate necklace that caught the clubhouse lights every time she turned her head. The monument itself looked like something outside a gated resort. Stone columns, brick wings, backlit metal lettering, landscape lighting, new irrigation, ornamental grasses, the whole package. Hawthorne Trace was a normal neighborhood of 2-story houses, pickups, and basketball hoops. Maris wanted the entrance to look like it guarded a private vineyard. At the board meeting, she called it an investment in community positioning. Dane Corbett, a retired estimator who lived 3 streets over, leaned toward me and whispered, "I think that means rocks with lights." I almost laughed. Then Maris clicked to the site plan. The new monument sat closer to my side yard than I expected. A week later, orange landscape flags appeared near the oaks. I walked out with a tape measure and found 2 of them several feet inside what I understood to be my boundary. I emailed Maris. Has a boundary survey been completed for the entrance project? Her answer came 9 minutes later. The HOA possesses a landscape easement along the entrance corridor. Contractors are authorized to proceed. I asked for the recorded easement. No response. At the next board meeting, I asked again. Maris gave me that polished little smile people use when they want to turn a question into a social mistake. "Barrett, you're a cabinet contractor, correct?" "Millwork." "Right. The board has professionals handling this." There it was. Not quite an insult, just a gentle little push toward the children's table. I told her I wasn't challenging the design. I wanted to see the easement. She closed her binder. The matter is settled. 3 days later, I left for work before 7. When I came home, the trees were gone. I parked at the curb because a skid steer was sitting halfway across my driveway. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Fresh oak has a sharp, almost sweet scent when it's cut, and the whole yard was full of it. The second thing I noticed was the dust. Fine tan sawdust had drifted across the concrete and collected against the garage door like dirty snow. 5 stumps. Not damaged trees, not trimmed trees. 5 stumps. A worker in a neon shirt was feeding branches into a chipper near the entrance. Another guy was running a stump grinder, the machine chewing the ground with a metallic whine that I could feel through my boots. Maris stood beside the excavation with a tablet tucked against her arm. I walked over. Who authorized the tree removal? She barely glanced up. I did. Those were on my property. No, they were in the HOA landscape easement. Show me the easement. Her expression changed just enough to tell me she'd expected anger, not paperwork. Barrett, we already discussed this. No, you told me it existed. That's not the same thing. One of the concrete guys stopped pretending not to listen. Maris lowered her voice. You are disrupting a board-approved project. I looked past her. The excavator had already opened a trench for the monument footing. Broken roots stuck from the red soil like snapped cables. Who's the contractor? A man in a gray polo stepped forward and introduced himself as Nolan Pike, project superintendent for Ridgeway Site and Stone. I asked him what property documents he'd been given. He looked at Maris before answering. We were told the HOA controlled the work area. Told by who? Another glance. Ms. Holloway. That was useful. Maris heard it too. Enough, she said. The board has legal authority here. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Every stump. Every machine. The tire tracks. The excavation. The orange stakes. The company names on the trucks. I took wide shots showing the street, the entrance, and the house, so nobody could later claim the photos lacked context. Then I moved closer and photographed the cut faces of the trunks with a tape measure across them. Maris folded her arms. Are you finished? No. I photographed the timestamp on the stump grinder's rental sticker. I build shop drawings for a living. If somebody else can't understand what happened from the page, the drawing failed. The same rule applies to evidence. Take the wide shot. Take the detail. Show scale. Show location. Save the originals. That's the takeaway document, a property dispute like you may have to explain it later to someone who was never there. The chipper crew had stacked several trunk sections near the curb for haul-off. I asked Nolan if any of them had been removed yet. Not yet. I want the larger sections left here. Maris cut in. They're construction debris. They're my trees. If you're right about the easement, you can prove it. Until then, don't remove them. Nolan didn't argue. He told his crew to leave 3 large sections beside my driveway. That was the first moment I saw doubt enter the project. Not panic. Just doubt. Then she handed me an envelope. I thought maybe it contained the easement. It was an invoice. $3,850 for owner's side vegetation removal and site preparation. Due in 30 days. I read it twice. You cut down my trees and you're billing me for it. The vegetation originated on your lot. I looked at her. So now it's my lot. For half a second, nobody said anything. Nolan stared very hard at a coil of conduit. Maris recovered quickly. The trees were yours. The easement rights are ours. Those facts are not inconsistent. That sentence was going to age badly. I called Ellis Rourke before I even went inside. Ellis was a licensed surveyor who had staked 2 commercial jobs for my shop over the years. He wasn't dramatic. He could make a birthday party sound like a drainage report, which was exactly what I wanted. I told him I needed a boundary survey fast. Then I called Cade Larkin, a certified arborist I'd met when we repaired millwork at a historic house after a storm. Cade asked one question. Do you have photos from before they were cut up? I had 8 years of them. That evening, while Laurel and I were sorting pictures, a concrete truck rolled past the front window. I went outside. The crew was setting forms. Maris had ordered them to keep going. And when Ellis arrived the next morning, he crouched beside one of the orange flags, scraped dirt away with his boot and said, "This isn't a property corner." "What is it?" "Layout stake." He stood up and looked toward the excavation. They built their line from the contractor's line Barrett, not from a survey monument. That was when the argument stopped being about what Maris believed. Now I wanted to know what her project was actually sitting on. By noon the next day, Maris had apparently decided that if evidence was coming, paperwork should come first. I got an email from the HOA management company with the subject line, "Formal Notice of Interference." According to the letter, I had obstructed an approved common area improvement, confronted contractors, and created a risk of delay. The board was imposing a $100 daily fine beginning the following Monday if I continued interfering with authorized operations. I read it at the workbench while a shaper screamed through a run of white oak behind me. Laurel waited until the machine stopped. How many dollars a day? 100. And they still want the $38.50. Yep. She nodded slowly. Good. Put that in the folder marked, People Who Love Paper. We had one now. I didn't answer Maris first. I went to the county register of deeds. Property fights get strangely emotional because the dirt feels personal. But recorded property rights are boring on purpose. Deeds, plats, easements, restrictions. They're designed so that somebody 50 years later can figure out who owns what without relying on whoever speaks the loudest at a board meeting. I pulled the recorded subdivision plat for Hawthorne Trace, my deed, and every indexed easement connected to our parcel. I also pulled the declaration and amendments filed for the HOA. Then I went to the county planning portal and downloaded the monument permit packet. That was when I found the first serious mismatch. On the recorded subdivision plat, the HOA entrance parcel ended east of the old oak line. On the site plan submitted for the new monument, the property line appeared several feet farther west. Not an inch, not a drafting hair. Feet. I printed both drawings at the same scale and laid them side by side on my assembly table. Laurel came over with a pencil. Which one's supposed to be real? The recorded plat controls the recorded subdivision boundary, unless something later changed it. Did something later change it? I haven't found anything. The permit application also included a signed owner authorization section, identifying the HOA as the party with legal control over the construction site. That mattered. A permit doesn't magically decide ownership. Building departments don't run title searches for every landscape wall and entrance sign. Applicants are expected to accurately represent their site. So if the application was wrong, the permit didn't make the wrong boundary, right? Takeaway. An approved permit can authorize construction activity, but it does not give someone ownership of land they never had. I emailed Ellis the 2 drawings. He called 5 minutes later. Where did this site plan come from? Permit file. Who prepared it? Design consultant. Any survey seal? No. He made a sound somewhere between a sigh and a cough. Okay, don't use that line for anything. I'll locate the recorded monuments. That afternoon I sent 2 certified letters. One went to Hawthorne Trace HOA. One went to Ridgeway Site and Stone. I kept the language simple. I disputed the claimed easement. I asserted that the tree removal area appeared to be inside my parcel based on recorded documents. I demanded preservation of project records and requested that no further work occur within the disputed strip until a licensed boundary survey was complete. I attached the recorded plat. I did not attach every card I had. There is a difference between giving notice and giving somebody your entire case. The certified mail receipt mattered because later nobody could say we didn't know there was a boundary dispute. That is another useful rule. When a dispute becomes serious, stop relying on phone calls and create a dated record of what you told people and when. Nolan called me the next morning. I got your letter. Good. We're reviewing it. Also good. Maris says the easement is in the HOA files. Then send it. Pause. I'll ask. Meanwhile, the forms were still in place. Rebar had been delivered. The steel rods clanked against the trailer as the crew unloaded them, and every metallic hit carried across the stripped side yard. Maris sent me a separate email. Your continuing obstruction may result in collection remedies available under the governing documents. No greeting, no signature beyond her title. I forwarded it to Laurel. She replied with one line. People who love paper. Then I noticed something in the county permit packet I hadn't seen the first time. The site plan boundary wasn't just different from the recorded plat. It placed the future monument foundation directly across the strip where my oaks had stood. If Ellis confirmed the recorded line, Maris hadn't merely cut trees inside my property. She was preparing to pour a permanent structure on it. The next morning, Cade Larkin came by with a diameter tape, a clipboard, and the kind of expression people get when they've spent 20 years explaining that mature trees are not decorative weeds. He started with the stumps: species, diameter, condition, location, visible decay or lack of it, root flare, distance from the house, functional value. Then he asked for old photos. I had plenty. Christmas pictures with the oaks behind us. Bryn standing under one in a raincoat when she was 9. a shop delivery from 3 years earlier that happened to show the full canopy. Real estate listing photos from when we bought the house. Even a storm photo I had taken because lightning hit a pine across the street, but left our oaks untouched. Cade laid the images out on our dining table. These were healthy. That was my impression. It'll be more than your impression when I'm done. Maris chose that afternoon to escalate publicly. The HOA sent a neighborhood email titled Entrance Improvement Delay. It never used the word lawsuit because there wasn't one. It did say that a single adjacent owner was challenging established access rights and threatening the completion schedule of a project approved for the benefit of all homeowners. That adjacent owner would be me. The email also mentioned potential additional costs to the association. That phrase did exactly what it was meant to do. Within an hour, one neighbor texted me asking if I was trying to stop the project because I didn't like the sign. Another asked whether dues were going up. I answered both the same way. It's a boundary issue. I'm waiting on a licensed survey. No editorial, no screenshots, no campaign. If Maris wanted to tell a story before the facts arrived, fine. I wanted the facts to arrive with receipts. 2 days later, Cade sent his preliminary appraisal, $47,900. I called him because I assumed I'd misunderstood. For the trees, for documented loss and reasonable restoration analysis, yes. That's preliminary. People hear a number like that and imagine somebody pricing lumber at boutique furniture rates. That's not how tree damage is evaluated. A mature landscape tree may have functional value replacement limitations, condition, location, and restoration costs that have nothing to do with what a sawmill would pay for the trunk. Cade was careful about that. He used accepted appraisal methods, identified his assumptions, and made clear that final damages were a legal question for counsel and insurers. That mattered to me. I didn't need an inflated number. I needed a number someone else could defend. Takeaway: if property damage has specialized value, use a qualified professional to document it instead of inventing a number yourself. I sent Cade's report the photographs and my certified notice to Ridgeway's liability carrier after Nolan provided the claims contact. That changed the temperature immediately. The next morning, Nolan called. We're pausing work in the disputed strip. Good. Maris is not happy. I figured. She says she's sending proof of the easement. By lunch, I received it. It was a photocopy of a developer marketing map from more than a decade earlier. Not a recorded plat, not a deed, not an easement, a sales graphic. The entrance corridor was shaded green, and the shading happened to sweep across the area near my old trees. There was no legal description, no recording stamp, no grantor, no grantee, no easement language. At the bottom in tiny print were the words, "For illustrative purposes only." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Maris had spent 2 weeks calling this document an easement. I checked my original title commitment from when Laurel and I bought the house. It contained a schedule listing recorded exceptions and easements affecting our parcel. Utility easement along the rear. Drainage easement near one corner. Subdivision restrictions. Nothing matching Maris's claim. I emailed her. Please provide the book/page or instrument number for the recorded landscape easement you are relying upon. The marketing exhibit you sent is not a recorded easement. Her response came 40 minutes later. The association's historic use and developer intent are clear. That was a different argument, which told me the first one had failed. Outside the half-built entrance, sat in silence for the first time all week. No mixer, no grinder, just wind moving through the stripped yard and the occasional tap of loose plastic against a stake. Then I got a call from Ellis. I've found 2 original monuments. Good news, it depends what you think about concrete on your land. He wanted me there before he finished the field work. Ellis had 2 crew members with him when I got home. One was running the total station near the curb. The other had cleared packed soil from around a capped iron pin, about 6 inches below grade. Ellis pointed to it. Original subdivision monument. He walked me to a second point farther down the side yard. Matches the recorded plat. Then he showed me the line. It ran exactly where I had always understood the property edge to be, beyond the old oak trunks and through the area where Maris's crew had excavated. Ellis had already shot the footing forms. How far? At the deepest point, about 4 feet 8 inches over your line. I looked toward the monument site. That much? Yep. And the irrigation bed farther. He didn't smile. Surveyors seem to reserve emotion for bad closures and missing monuments. I asked about the supposed easement. He shook his head. Nothing in the documents you gave me. Title company can confirm the record search, but I'm not seeing a grant across this strip. He finished the fieldwork and sent me a stamped survey the next day. The drawing was almost disappointingly simple. No dramatic language, no accusation, no red arrows yelling trespass. Just bearings, distances, monuments, improvements, and a surveyor's seal. That's the beauty of a good technical document. It doesn't have to sound angry, because the measurements are doing the talking. Here was my parcel. Here was the HOA parcel. Here was the recorded boundary. Here were the stump locations. And here, crossing that line, was the proposed monument foundation. 4 feet 8 inches at its deepest encroachment. That one sheet changed everything. Until then, Maris could call it confusion. Old maps, historic use, contractor misunderstanding. Now we had a licensed professional putting a measurable line through the story. Then Laurel found the second piece. She was reading the Ridgeway construction agreement, which the HOA had finally produced in response to my records request. "Come here," she said. Section 6 contained a representation from the client, the HOA, that it had authority to provide access to the project site and authorize the contracted work. I read it twice. The clause did not make Maris personally liable for everything, and it did not decide the property dispute by itself, but it told us something important. Ridgeway had relied on the HOA's representation that the HOA controlled the work area. Nolan had now received my certified notice. He had Cade's appraisal, and he was about to receive Ellis's stamped survey. The innocent mistake window was closing. Take away once the facts are documented. Written notice matters because it separates what happened before someone knew from what they chose to do after they knew. I sent the survey to the HOA Ridgeway's insurer and the county planning office. Then I waited. Maris responded first. "The board disputes your surveyor's interpretation. Not the measurements, not the monuments. The interpretation." I forwarded that to Ellis. He called me. "What interpretation?" "Apparently the line." "The line is the line." Later that afternoon, I stood near the fresh stakes Ellis had set and looked at the unfinished monument. For the first time, I understood the shape of the problem. I didn't need to outtalk Maris. I needed every person involved to make their next decision in writing. And if she wanted to keep building after the survey arrived, I was going to let her own that decision. I spent the next 3 evenings in my workshop building the least exciting revenge plan in American history. No traps. No hidden cameras in fake birdhouses. No midnight concrete work. Just folders. I cleared one end of my assembly table and laid everything out in date order, deed, recorded, plat, title, commitment, Ellis's survey, Cade's appraisal, photographs, certified, mail receipts, HOA notices, permit drawings, Ridgeway's contract, and every email Maris had sent. Laurel made a spreadsheet. Date, sender, recipient, event, cost, supporting document. She color-coded it because apparently once you marry a bookkeeper, even righteous anger gets conditional formatting. Dane Corbett came by Thursday night. He had estimated commercial construction for 35 years and could read a big package faster than I could read a restaurant menu. I showed him the $84 $600 monument contract. He whistled. "That's proud." Mean I'd like to see the other bids. That went on the records request. I also filed a written complaint with the County Planning and Inspections Office. I kept it narrow. The built location appeared inconsistent with the approved site plan and recorded boundary. Attached were the permit drawing and Ellis's survey. I didn't ask the county to decide my title rights. That wasn't their job. I asked them to inspect whether the project they permitted was being constructed where the approved documents said it would be. Different question. Important question. Then Ellis came back and re-established the key points with more durable markers. Cade photographed the remaining root flare and stump locations before anybody could cover them with mulch. Ridgeway's insurer acknowledged the claim in writing. The plan was forming around one simple idea: preserve the scene before the scene changed. That weekend, Laurel opened the HOA newsletter and started laughing. She turned the laptop toward me. Maris had announced the ribbon cutting. Saturday, 10 a.m. Coffee service, pastries, realtor photographer, board remarks, community news videographer, Residents encouraged to attend. There was even a mock-up showing a red ribbon stretched between the stone columns. I read the announcement twice. She's still doing it, apparently. The monument wasn't technically complete, but Ridgway had resumed work outside what Nolan called the survey disputed portion. Maris was pushing them to finish veneer lighting, lettering, and landscaping before Saturday. I called my attorney, Soren Vale. Soren handled contracts and real estate disputes for several small businesses around the county. He had the useful habit of destroying dramatic ideas with very calm sentences. I can put a fence across it, I said. Do you need a fence? No. Then don't create a fence issue. What about blocking the crew? Don't touch their equipment. Don't threaten workers. You've given notice. Preserve your claims. So I just watch. You document. You communicate. You make sure your own conduct is boring. Lawyers are capable of making victory sound like responsible lawn maintenance. But he was right. If I gave Maris a video of me screaming at laborers or chaining machinery, she would use it to turn the dispute into my behavior. So the physical part of my plan stayed simple. Ellis would return Saturday morning and mark the boundary with high visibility line between temporary stakes placed entirely on my property. I would add lightweight orange safety mesh on my side only, not touching the monument or the HOA parcel. No damage. No obstruction outside my land. Just a bright, visible line. The county inspector assigned to the complaint, Tamshin Reed, told me she expected to review the site before or during the weekend, depending on scheduling. I sent her the ceremony time without asking for special treatment. I sent Ridgway's insurer the same information. Then the HOA records response arrived. Minutes, bid sheets, invoices, vendor list. Dane and I started reading. The lowest entrance bid was $61,200. Another was $67,900. Ridgway's base number was higher, but not enough to explain the full difference. Buried in the package was an $18, $750 line labeled Design Coordination. Vendor, Meridian Civic Aesthetics, LLC. Dane tapped the name. Know them? No. He opened his phone. 2 minutes later, he turned the screen toward me. The registered agent shared a home address with Garrick Sloan, the HOA vice president. The company owner was Garrick's wife. I sat back. Is that disclosed anywhere? We went through the minutes again. Nothing meaningful. No abstention noted, no relationship listed beside the award. No explanation of why that vendor had been selected. Now the ribbon cutting had two problems coming toward it. A boundary line nobody could move with a speech, and a money trail nobody had expected us to read. Maris came to my shop Friday morning. Not the house, the shop. That told me she wanted the conversation somewhere Laurel and the neighbors were less likely to hear it. She walked through the front office in that same polished fuchsia suit, pink heels clicking against concrete that usually saw work boots and pallet jacks. Behind her, the shop smelled like sawdust glue and the coffee my foreman had forgotten on the warmer for about 6 hours. I wiped my hands on a rag. Can I help you? We need to resolve this. I've been asking for that. She set a folder on my desk. The board is prepared to make a substantial accommodation. That word again. Accommodation. Like I had complained about the temperature in a hotel room. I opened the folder. The HOA would cancel the $3.850 vegetation invoice. It would withdraw the $100 per day interference fines. It would provide me a $7,500 landscaping allowance. In exchange, Laurel and I would grant a permanent landscape and monument easement over the disputed strip, release all claims related to the tree removal and construction, and sign a confidentiality agreement. I looked up. You want me to give you the land rights after you already used them? We want to formalize what the developer always intended. For $7,500, the board is offering to avoid unnecessary legal expense for everyone. I turned to the release. It covered unknown claims, too. Does Ridgway know you're offering this? Her jaw tightened. This is an association matter. Does the board know the survey shows 4 feet 8 inches of foundation on my parcel? The board has reviewed your assertions. That's not what I asked. She stood straighter. For a moment, the shop went quiet, except for the dust collector cycling down in the back. When that big fan stops, the silence comes in layers. Maris lowered her voice. Barrett, you can make this very expensive for your neighbors. There was the pressure point. Not we were wrong. Not we'll restore your property. Your neighbors will pay if you keep resisting. I closed the folder. No. She blinked. No easement, no release, no confidentiality agreement. You're rejecting the offer. I'm rejecting that offer. I handed her a one-page response Soren had helped me prepare. Restore the disturbed area. Move all permanent improvements entirely onto HOA-controlled land. Compensate documented tree loss and reasonable professional costs. Correct the permit record. Rescind the fines and invoice. No confidentiality clause. Maris read it standing up. This is extortionate. No, it's written. She looked at me over the top of the page. The ribbon cutting is tomorrow. I know. You intend to disrupt it. I intend to stay on my property. That answer bothered her more than a threat would have. She picked up her folder and left. At 1:17 that afternoon, Nolan forwarded an email to Soren and me through Ridgway's insurer. Maris had instructed Ridgway to complete all feasible finish work before Saturday morning. The email specifically said the board rejected the neighbor's boundary position and directed the contractor to proceed based on the HOA's authorization. That message was sent after Maris had Ellis's stamped survey, after my certified notice, after Cade's appraisal, after the insurer was involved. Nolan's cover note was short, for documentation. I read Maris's email twice. Laurel leaned against my desk. She wrote that. After today. There is a point in some disputes where the smartest thing the other side can do is stop generating evidence. Maris had passed that point at highway speed. Takeaway: if someone asks you to sign away disputed rights after the facts are documented, read the release more carefully than the dollar amount. That evening, Ridgway's crew finished the stone veneer on the HOA side, installed the metal hawthorn trace lettering, and tested the landscape lights. From my yard, the monument looked expensive. I'll give Maris that. Soft white light washed up the stone columns. New mulch gave off that damp, woody smell landscaping companies somehow produce by the truckload. The letters glowed cleanly against the brick. It would have photographed beautifully, except for one thing. At 7:40 Saturday morning, Ellis pulled up. He opened the back of his truck and took out a bundle of bright survey line. By 8:15, the actual property boundary was visible from the street. It wasn't subtle. Neon line crossed the fresh landscaping, and every time a car entered Hawthorne Trace, the first thing the driver saw was the expensive new monument sitting on one side of a line Maris had spent weeks pretending did not matter. The boundary line lasted less than 3 hours the first time. Ellis had set temporary wooden stakes on Thursday as reference points before the ceremony. Friday morning, 2 were gone, not knocked over. Gone. I found one lying beside the HOA mulch bed and couldn't find the other at all. Maris emailed Ellis before I could contact her. Unapproved markers placed in common landscaping have been removed. Ellis called me after reading it. Were my stakes in common landscaping? According to your survey, no. Correct. He came back that afternoon. The good news was that wooden stakes are not the boundary. They mark the boundary. The actual survey control came from recorded monuments and measured positions. Pulling a lath out of the ground does not move a legal parcel any more than tearing a mile marker out of a ditch moves the next town. Ellis documented the missing stakes, reestablished the positions, and took photographs. Then Laurel reminded me about the driveway camera. Our camera covered the side of the garage and enough of the front yard to catch delivery trucks. At 9:46 Thursday night, a landscape company pickup rolled into frame. A man got out, walked toward the monument, returned carrying 2 wooden stakes, put them in the bed of the truck, and drove away. The logo matched the landscaping subcontractor. I saved the original clip in 2 places and sent a copy to Soren. He told me exactly what I expected. Don't post it. I wasn't going to. Don't confront the worker. I wasn't going to. Good. You're learning to be boring. By then, Maris was trying a different tactic. A petition appeared on the neighborhood social page, accusing me of attempting to extract tens of thousands of dollars from homeowners over landscaping. It asked residents to support the board's historic right to maintain the entrance corridor. Then, the board scheduled an emergency vote Friday evening to confirm and ratify that right. Dane nearly choked when I told him. They're going to vote themselves an easement. Apparently, democracy has expanded. An HOA board can vote on a lot of association business. It cannot create my signature. It cannot retroactively turn my deed into a different deed, by raising hands in a clubhouse. Soren sent a short letter before the meeting, stating that Laurel and I did not consent to any easement and that no board action should be represented as creating an interest in our property. I attended anyway. Maris sat at the front table beside Garrick Sloan. She looked composed, but the room had changed. People who had ignored entrance project meetings were suddenly there because the phrase property dispute gets attention, and the phrase tens of thousands of dollars gets folding chairs filled. Maris described me as an adjacent owner seeking leverage. Then Dane raised his hand. I have a budget question. She tried to defer him. He didn't let her. What's Meridian Civic Aesthetics? Garrick moved in his chair. Maris said a project design consultant. Dane held up the invoice. Why did they get $18,750? Design coordination. Who owns it? Silence. Not long. Maybe 2 seconds. But if you've ever sat in a public meeting, you know 2 seconds can be an entire weather system. Dane continued. State business records show the owner at Garrick's home address. Every head in the room turned toward Garrick. He cleared his throat. My wife operates the company independently. A man in the second row said, was that disclosed before the vote? Garrick said something about everybody knowing everybody in a small community. That was not an answer. I watched Maris realize the meeting had moved away from me. She tried to pull it back. This discussion is outside tonight's purpose. A woman near the aisle said, we're discussing an $84,000 project. How is $18,000 outside the purpose? The emergency easement vote never happened. Maris adjourned after 23 minutes, citing disruption. Outside, the air was warm and thick, and the new monument lights were already glowing. The bright lettering looked confident. The people standing under it did not. As I walked home, my phone buzzed. Tamsin Reed, the county inspector, had emailed. She had reviewed the complaint materials. She planned to be on site Saturday morning. Maris had invited a camera to her ribbon cutting. She had wanted photographs of stonework flowers and a clean red ribbon. Instead, she was about to get a licensed survey line, a contractor who had preserved her written instructions, a room full of irritated homeowners, and an inspector carrying the approved site plan. Now the county was coming too. Saturday morning looked exactly like the kind of morning Maris had been planning for. Clear sky, mild breeze, fresh mulch, coffee urns on a folding table. A bakery had delivered 2 trays of pastries with little toothpick flags that said Hawthorne Trace. The monument itself was finished enough for photographs. Stone columns flanked the entrance. Dark metal letters stood against new brick. Ornamental grasses had been planted in neat clusters. A red ribbon stretched across the walkway in front of it. And then there was Ellis's line. Bright fluorescent cord ran from one survey point to the next, straight across the polished landscape bed. Orange safety mesh stood a few inches inside my side, supported by temporary posts that never crossed the boundary. The line passed through the monument footprint exactly where Ellis's stamped survey said it did. You could see the problem from 50 yards away. By 9:30, residents were gathering. Maris arrived at 9:42. Fuchsia suit, pink heels, gold jewelry. Controlled expression. She saw the line before she saw me. What is that property boundary? Remove it. No. This is a community event. It's also my property. She walked toward the mesh and stopped just short of it. You're intentionally creating a spectacle. I looked at the videographer she had hired. I didn't invite the camera. That landed. Garrett came up behind her and started talking about calling counsel. Then Nolan Pike arrived. He wasn't dressed for a ribbon cutting. Work boots, Ridgeway polo folder under his arm. Maris's face tightened. What are you doing here? Our insurer asked me to attend. That landed harder. At 9:58, a county vehicle pulled to the curb. Tamsin Reed stepped out carrying a clipboard and rolled plan set. Maris intercepted her before she reached us. This is a private HOA matter. Tamsin kept walking. I received a site plan compliance complaint. The neighbor is disputing an easement. I'm not here to decide your easement. That was the cleanest sentence spoken all morning. Tamsin unfolded the approved plan on the hood of her vehicle. Ellis handed her a copy of the stamped boundary survey. She looked at the recorded monuments, then at the line, then at the foundation and finished monument. She took measurements with Ellis. Residents drifted closer. The coffee line disappeared. Nobody cared about pastries anymore. Maris kept explaining developer intent. Tamsin kept measuring. Finally, she said, the constructed footprint does not match the boundary information represented on the approved site plan. No additional work or alteration in the disputed area until this is corrected through the county process. Maris went still. We have a permit. You have an approved permit for the submitted plan. I'm telling you the built condition does not match the documentation I'm looking at. Maris turned toward me. Barrett has manufactured this dispute. I opened my folder. No. Ellis measured it. I handed Tamsin the recorded plat and my deed copy. Then Cade's report. Then the certified mail receipts. Maris raised her voice. The entrance is community property. There were probably 50 people close enough to hear. I looked at her. Then show everybody the deed, because my surveyor already showed them the line. Nobody clapped. I'm glad they didn't. Real life is better when the room gets quiet. Maris opened her mouth, then closed it. Nolan stepped forward. For the record, Ridgway received Mr. Voss's written boundary notice before final finish work. Maris snapped her head toward him. Nolan continued. We also received the stamped survey. The HOA instructed us, in writing, to proceed with feasible work. Garrick muttered. This is ridiculous. Dane heard him. What's ridiculous is paying your wife's company $18,750 on an $84,600 project without telling us. That turned the crowd. A woman near the coffee table said, Is that true? Another resident asked for the contract. Someone else asked why the board had told them one homeowner was causing the extra costs. The videographer lowered the camera for a second, looked at Maris, then raised it again. Maris tried to end the event. We'll reschedule the ribbon cutting after council reviews these issues. She reached for the ceremonial scissors. Tamsin said please leave the site as is, until documentation is complete. Maris set the scissors back down. That was the image I remember. Not her yelling. Not a police car. Not some dramatic arrest. A red ribbon fluttering in front of an entrance that could not legally be celebrated yet, while the woman who had spent weeks telling me the line didn't matter stood 3 feet from a fluorescent cord proving that it did. The ribbon stayed uncut. And by Monday morning the HOA's lawyer was asking for a settlement conference. The settlement conference happened 12 days later. The HOA's attorney had the recorded plat Ellis's survey, Cade's appraisal, the permit discrepancy, the certified notices, Ridgway's correspondence, and Maris's written instruction to continue after receiving the survey. A group of residents submitted the signatures required for a special membership meeting. Maris tried to frame it as an emotional reaction to a complicated property issue, but people were no longer focused on the property line alone. They wanted to know why the lowest entrance bid had been passed over. They wanted to know why $18,750 went to Garrick's wife's company. They wanted to know why that relationship hadn't been plainly disclosed in the meeting minutes. And they wanted to know why the board had billed me $3,850 for removing trees from land it was now negotiating to obtain rights over. The legal resolution took a few weeks, but it was clean. The HOA rescinded every interference fine. The $3,850 vegetation invoice disappeared. The association acknowledged that no recorded landscape or monument easement crossed our disputed strip. The settlement covered the documented tree loss restoration work, Ellis's survey costs, and a portion of the professional expenses Laurel and I had incurred dealing with the mess. Cade's $47,900 appraisal remained one of the central damage documents. The monument could not stay where it was. Ridgway removed the encroaching section under a revised plan and rebuilt the affected portion completely inside the HOA parcel. Watching finished masonry get dismantled is a special kind of expensive silence. Somebody had paid once to install it and was paying again to move it. The county approved the corrected layout after revised documentation. The new entrance ended up smaller. It also ended up legal. At the special HOA meeting, Maris was removed as president. She did not give a farewell speech. Garrick resigned before the board completed its internal review of the Meridian Civic Aesthetics contract. The new board hired independent counsel and an outside accountant to examine the procurement. The $18,750 subcontract was later unwound and repaid as part of the board's resolution with the parties involved. No one went to jail. What happened was more ordinary and more useful. People started reading. The new board adopted a requirement for independent boundary verification before any common area construction near private lots. Vendor relationships had to be disclosed in writing before votes. Competitive bids and supporting documents became available through a homeowner records portal. Dane volunteered for the finance committee, which meant somebody was finally going to read invoices before the pastries were ordered. As for our side yard, Laurel and I had a decision to make. I could have left the strip bare for a year out of spite. Instead, Cade helped us choose native white oaks, serviceberry, red bud, and pollinator plants that would rebuild the buffer over time. They were smaller than what we lost. There was no pretending otherwise. Mature trees do not come back because a settlement check clears. But the new plantings were ours. Several neighbors offered to help. That turned into a Saturday workday, then into a plan to extend native plantings along a neglected common greenway near the walking path. The new board funded part of it from the landscaping budget, and residents donated the rest. I saved one sound section from the largest original oak. Months later, after the legal folders were finally off my assembly table, I milled that piece flat. The grain was tight and clean. I built a simple bench and set it near the new greenway planting. Bryn ran her hand over the seat. "Is this from our trees?" "Part of one." She sat down. By then, the replacement oaks were only a few feet tall. They'll take years to throw the kind of shade the old ones did. I'm okay with that. Some fixes are immediate. The good ones usually aren't. If you've ever had an HOA draw a line through your property, your wallet, or your patience, tell me what happened. And if you like stories where the paperwork eventually catches up with the people who think rules only work one direction, subscribe and stick around. Hawthorne Trace still has an entrance sign. It just finally sits where it belongs. Before we close this one, I keep coming back to one detail from Barrett's story. 4 feet 8 inches. That's all the survey had to show. Not a speech, not a threat, just a line on paper carried out onto the ground where everybody could see it. Barrett could have turned that first afternoon into a shouting match. A lot of us probably would have understood if he had. 5 mature oaks were already on the ground. But he gave the facts room to stand there on their own. And they did. I'm curious, if you found out your HOA had built several feet onto your property, would you have stopped the crew immediately or documented everything first? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoy these Karen HOA Courtroom, give the video a like, subscribe, and share it with somebody who's had their own run-in with a board that got a little too comfortable. Sometimes the line doesn't need an argument. It just needs to be visible.